Welcome to Chattel Fixtures PEI Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, David Cyrus MacDonald. Today, we are speaking with Josh MacPherson of Maple Arc Contracting, which he co-owns with his business partner, Gareth Povey. They started working together in January of 2021. They pride themselves in honesty, dedication, and integrity in their workmanship, as well as communication through their projects with their clients. They offer new construction, renovation, decks and fences, and a variety of commercial and personal work. They're active on social media and post updates about their various projects and have released some more polished videos highlighting their approach to business and their projects. I thought today would be an interesting time to talk with Josh about what he has learned since starting a new construction company, what advice he has for people who want to build or renovate, and just in general, talk about building on PEI. So welcome, Josh MacPherson.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, David.
Yeah, man.
Appreciate it.
So let's get at it. What made you and Gareth decide to start this? Like maybe talk about that forming and why you wanted to do it a little bit.
Well, it's something I learned real quick that we both enjoy it. We like building things. We like interacting with people. So why do that for anyone else other than yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Other than the mounds and heaps of pressure and stress that come with it,
okay.
Especially in the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, it would be. I mean, I imagine like building, say if you're doing renovation or something, or even if you're doing something where you're fixing an existing thing where there's no permits required or anything. Mm-hmm. I feel like that would be such a different undertaking than say, okay, all right, Josh, I bought this piece of land. What's next, right? Because you can imagine the kind of the permitting, the financing, the money side of it, the business side of it, the human interaction side, the staff. Like there's a lot of levels involved there. So yeah, maybe that makes total sense that it's a lot. Like maybe talk about that and what it's meant.
Yeah, so that's a huge question, and to start into that, we could do the entire podcast on just that. So maybe we'll just talk a little bit about it. But yeah, so that big thing you just said about going from doing renovations, like where lots of handymen start,
absolutely,
or smaller companies, to try to branch into new construction. That's a big leap. And lots of stuff that people don't understand or realize how much goes into that transition.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's so many different moving parts, keeping it all organized, keeping up on all your sub trades and different things that have to come in at each stage of the process. Oh, I gotta imagine there'd be aspects that would be kind of like cooking, right? Like you have to get this part cooking before this part starts, yeah, exactly.
Right? And then you need if there's no walls, the electrician can't come in and put in wiring, exactly. But they're scheduled a certain time and the framer's not here yet.
Exactly.
Or are you guys doing the framing?
So here's where we're a bit different as far as a contracting company goes. We have a core group that self-perform about 80%. Don't quote me on that exact number, but we do about 80% of the build.
Oh, okay.
So we take care of the foundation other than the excavating.
So is that do you mostly do ICF foundations or what kind of?
Yes. For the most part. Yeah. We
for the
strictly only do ICF only because we believe in that product. Mm-hmm. It's better than just traditional form concrete foundations because it gives you that extra R value, that extra insulation, and it also
it's more weather resistant too. I gotta imagine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is. It gives you that air barrier as well. Like say you had a crack in a traditional foundation, which happens with concrete cracks, right?
Right. Right, but this would give it more like you wouldn't get water directly against the concrete too, right? Like it's going to go against that outer layer of styrofoam. For the listener who isn't familiar with the ICF, it's basically like imagine these rows of styrofoam with
Lego blocks.
Yeah, it's like styrofoam Lego blocks that you put together in the shape of the foundation, and then there's like connector points. Is there rebar between there too, or do you just
so we have to add that. Yeah.
So you add in the rebar, and then you pour concrete into the gap between the styrofoam, basically.
Exactly. Right? Yep.
Yeah, and so I mean, when I'm selling, like I always feel good about the product. When I'm selling ICF, I love being able to tell buyers, oh yeah, it's an ICF foundation, even if they don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I like it. I like being able to say that. Even if it's something like there's like some kind of water gets behind the siding or something like that. If you have a wood frame place versus an ICF place, I'm going to feel a lot better about that. Say if it comes to that, which hopefully it never does, but like down the road, right?
Yeah.
Something ever happened, or like an older place, like because they had ICF foundations going back quite a ways.
They do, and I didn't realize how far it actually went back and how uncommon it was to have ICF. It's definitely at the forefront of things now, and many different companies now are coming out with different versions. But it was like 20 years ago that people were using ICF.
Oh yeah, and I think even a little bit before then, because I thought I was talking to someone who thought it was like around like 03, 04 that they started coming out on PEI. And then I think I was talking to someone who there might have even been some back in the 90s, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah. And I didn't look into it that far.
Yeah.
Other than that same thought of, holy crap, it's been around a long time.
Yeah, it has. But it's interesting. Okay, so you're taking on this big project. You got this. I mean, here's the thing: when you're running a business, it is different. It's like it's like a cook starting a restaurant often, where it's like the food may be good, but it's like you need that whole experience. Like there's this book, The E-Myth Revisited. Do you ever hear that one?
I have not.
It's a great one, but it's like talks about working on your business, not just in your business. I mean, he says rather than in your business. I think both is better. But if you imagine you're walking into Starbucks, right? You can almost picture it. You can almost smell it. You can see the green around you. You know that they're going to ask your name and write it on the cup when you get it, right? Mm-hmm. The whole experience is mapped up, and what's happening kind of under the hood in terms of all the education for the staff. They have these like reward cards that the staff all love. Like I know from someone that used to work at Starbucks. So there's this whole way of operating a business that just goes from finance to value delivery, value creation, marketing, sales, all those things packaged together versus just the value creation part, which is the cooking, if you will.
Exactly.
Right.
And Starbucks has actually done that well. They're like a very good example of that, because all that has to be shown in what you see when you come, like it's all created and drafted at the back end, but what you see is all their staff serving you the coffee or serving you the food, right? So they've done a great job, and they've created more than, anyway, we're talking about Starbucks, but they've created more than just a place where you get your food and drink. They've created an atmosphere where it feels almost like home. You can go there and sit with a computer, or sit with your friends. Like it's just a spot where it's not just to go have coffee. They've created a welcoming atmosphere.
It is, and there's a consistency between locations as well too. It's like, I can imagine, and there's different, there's sort of a coffee shop vibe. I mean, locally, it's like we've got some amazing, like, Receiver Coffee, for example. We've got some amazing places that are actually really well-run businesses too.
This is a chain.
Yeah, but it's really interesting when you see the chain format where it's like, but also, but yeah, so you're running a business. Okay, so maybe talk about that a little bit. Like what, for you and Gareth kind of getting into this, like you're building out your business, you're taking on different types of projects. You're, you would have, do you have staff working for you as well?
Yeah. We have 5 guys total, including myself and Gareth. So 3 others and 1 more about to be hired. So we'll be 6 strong.
So you got to keep yourself busy then.
Yeah. So it's not hard to stay busy in this climate.
Right.
The only thing is now that we need to stay busy, it's taking time away from me being there as an oversight, I guess, and making sure things stay on task, stay on track. So there's large difficulties in scaling a construction business, especially in labor shortage, in competency levels, in staff you could hire, and creating the systems to train them properly, especially when we're a company that self-performs so much. Like I was saying, we do we start with the foundation, we do the framing, we do the drywalling, we do roofing, we do...
Oh, you do the roofing too?
Yeah. Shingle and metal. we'll sub out like large intricate things that are going to take a long time.
Yep.
Only because it takes a long time, and we could spend time doing other things.
Yeah.
But that's to help keep costs down, as I've seen PEI is very cost focused, where we'd like to hopefully branch into the not so much cost focused area and more into the let's give the best product possible area. That's our foreseeable goal right now, is to branch into that.
Yeah, because I mean, it's there's kind of like the basic standards that are required by the building code. I remember you in one of your promo videos, you were talking about kind of there is the building code, and then there's like there's like building science and where it is, and you know, you have to take care of the building code, but you want to not necessarily stop at that. You want to think of, okay, what's going to be the best product? What's going to be the best?
Exactly.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So I got into building science just from listening to a podcast. It's the Built Show Network.
Nice.
With Matt Risinger, and then that led me to a couple others like the Unbuilded podcast, Jake Gruden, Steve Basic, and Peter Yost. They do a really good job of starting at the basics, and not only that in building science, but they also give tidbits of information for clients on what you should ask your contractor, ask your builder. They're just a well-rounded group of guys trying to just spread information and get it out there. And PEI, from what I've seen, is very cost focused. Like let's try to get the product for this cost. So they'll get a couple different estimates, and they're not going to necessarily go with the cheapest estimate. But the problem is from what I've noticed, there's not a lot of detail in estimates.
Yes.
So it's really hard to compare apples to apples. So if we give a detailed estimate, and then let's say it's $10,000 more than an estimate that they got from another construction group or contractor group, and it's all they got was essentially, let's say it's a kitchen renovation, for example, or even better one because it can bring building science into it. Let's say it's a window package installation. We'll go into depth and give the client what we're going to do, how we're going to manage the elements, and essentially how we're going to manage the installation compared to how if another company gives you an estimate, they're only going to say it's going to be this price and we're going to install your windows.
Right. Yeah.
And then the client goes and says, oh, well, we're going to go with that one because they're doing the same thing. When really, do they know how they're going to install it? Maybe not. Are they going to, make sure that their windows are going to be warranted, make sure that if anything happens, that they'll be repaired or fixed or replaced. So that's a big thing where people have to be mindful of the ways things are being installed.
Yeah, right. Right. So it's not just the specific brand of window even. It's like part of it is how you're framing that window in, how you're sealing it, all that stuff.
Exactly. Like a couple quick tips for people that are going to have their windows installed. Make sure that when the window's framed, the bottom sill has a tilt to it, 5-degree tilt. So this is essentially a water management thought process in windows, because Mother Nature's relentless. It never stops. It never ends. So eventually, as materials degrade, as wind and rain and snow and sleet and hail is hitting your home, it eventually starts to find its way in. Yeah. So what can you do to manage that? You can tilt your windowsill so when water does get in behind there and eventually makes its way behind the flashing and behind the window frame, it hits the sill and falls forward and out instead. And your sill's protected because as long as it was installed properly, it has a flashing tape on it.
So it's like, I mean, that's an interesting thing about, like, I remember, sometimes thinking, oh, this is more complicated than this in terms of water flow around a house, but it's like really so much of it is just like, let's just get that water away. It's like sometimes you'll see an older place and a gutter has fallen off or something like that, and water is gushing down, and they're just like, oh, we'll get to that later. It's like, this is so important to keep water away from your house, and it's gonna come, but like, then where does it go?
Control layers. There's 4 control layers. Water is number 1. You're right. So that's the number 1 most important thing you need to keep away from your home is water.
Yeah.
Right. That envelope has to keep water out.
Yeah.
But then you got wind, air.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one that's kind of overlooked, I think, from what we've seen. As you can think back to all the old homes, like if you ever go into an old home, just put your hand by plugs, feel air coming in. Put your hand by windows at the edges. You can feel air coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So airflow is really bad, especially in today's building standards where we are making walls have no air movement, or they're supposed to have no air movement. So if you have leaky points, not only does air come in, so think of a hot, humid day.
Yeah.
Right? And then think of a hot, humid day in the fall.
Okay.
Okay. So you have let's say it's September, but you had 22 degrees and it was humid. And then you're having 10 degrees at night.
Right.
So you had lots of hot, humid air come into your wall, which with that came moisture.
Yeah.
Not just the wind or the air, it was moisture. Mm-hmm. And now you're changing the temperature drastically. The problem is the condensing point of that vapor essentially that's in your wall.
It turns into water.
Turns into water.
Yeah.
In your wall. So now when we do that
over and over again for
over
years.
and over again, exactly, builds up.
Yeah. Air quality issues. You get
more or less
building material getting
rotted
behind walls that you don't even know happening. Yeah, that's a little like there. Okay, so we got water, we got air. Was there a couple of
thermal?
So temperature. Yeah.
So temperature control. Yeah, that's the third most important. And then vapor. Vapor is. Have you heard of like a vapor barrier? Yeah. So they put importance on that. But as long as you take care of the first 3, vapor will take care of itself for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you look back at those old houses too, they were a lot more drafty oftentimes, but they also, it was far like the further in time you go back, the less common air exchangers were. And so houses were sealed less, but they also, you have an old farmhouse. It was almost like it felt like it was drafty on purpose, not actually, but like you would have fresh air in the house versus if you had like the way they are built now, when done right, super tight.
Exactly.
You need that.
And this is the point I was getting at with making sure your building envelope has no air penetrations, because we are making the walls super tight. The house itself doesn't breathe, so there's no air movement in those walls. So water has no way to clear. So all it does is build up, and then starts to decay and destroy the building materials that it's attached to.
And I mean, PEI, like, it's got to be, compared to your average market, it's got to be like particularly treacherous for this kind of thing because we're surrounded by water, right? So, the amount of humidity in the air. I mean, if you're in the desert I've spent some time in Texas, for example. It's like, if you're in the desert there, even the hot doesn't feel as hot in a way because it's drier.
Yeah.
So we've got all that humidity in the summertime. We've got, especially these last few years, the winter is insane. It's just like hot one day, absolutely freezing.
Yeah.
The next thing's melting and cooling, which also, like, say if you old foundations, they must be taking a beating right now. The ones that had like water sitting against them and things like that, because you can imagine the old concrete, the water freezing and thawing and freezing and thawing and just
for sure
degrading these things. It's like, not to be like make it scary or anything for people, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is an easy question to answer or not, but in your view, is there something that defines maple arc?
Don't have a definition yet, I don't think.
Right.
We got many different paths that we're exploring and trying to understand. But one thing I can say is our integrity level is high. We're never going to leave people out on the lurch. If we mess up, we're going to fix it.
Yeah.
We can guarantee that. But that's why we're striving to learn all this information, and with all the new age technology and new age thoughts and governments pushing energy efficiency, we have to understand the whys and hows rather than just here, go do it.
Right.
And this is, again, back to that point of making all these walls and houses super tight with laxy-daisy, building, and people just kind of throwing windows in, throwing the sheathing on with just Tyvek, not trying to think of ways to help clear the system and keep water out. We're going to end up with a lot of newer homes that have rotting out walls, and I've already seen it start to happen, and I'm sure it's going to be more and more prevalent as this new energy efficient building science is pushed on builders without the actual teaching and understanding. Good thing is like the Network of Excellence here on Prince Edward Island, they're starting that process, and they're trying to get builders involved, and they just gave out a free course in
Sorry, who did?
The Network of Excellence.
Network of Excellence?
Yeah, with Efficiency PEI.
Oh, okay.
They gave out, to all their members, they gave out a building science course.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, to anyone who wanted it.
Yeah.
Now, it's not mandatory, and again, that's another issue. There's nothing that's mandatory really here in regards to building and contractors. There's no licensing to be a builder.
Right. There is for the trades.
For specific trades. Electrician, plumber,
HVAC.
They all have sealed
right
trades.
Yeah.
The problem is you could go out if you have some money and some tools and say, okay, I'm a builder, and go try to get clients to build for.
Right.
So anyone can technically go do that.
And I guess they would be subject to permitting and subject to, building code.
Yes.
So there's rules.
For sure. But the problem there is so you're right. Everything has to be done right because everything is inspected now.
Yeah.
Anything new gets inspected.
Yeah. So they can't just kind of like, completely abdicate their responsibility in that process.
Right.
But there has to be some kind of I'm not surprised to hear that there would be kind of different levels of quality to that.
And that mandatory inspection process only came into effect in 2021.
Right. Yeah. Because it wasn't that long before that we introduced the 2015 building code.
Yeah. 2020 comes out this year too. It's supposed to be this month.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Oh, okay.
We're updating.
Do they send out advanced copies of that or anything? Or
the Construction Association has it.
Oh, okay.
We can't purchase it yet because they don't have the copies yet, but Sam told me that it would be this month.
And so will we kind of use the 2015 building code for the time being, and then it'll transition to that at some point?
Yeah, my understanding of that is until it's legislated in.
Okay.
We still use the 2015, but you can operate to the 2020 standard.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's not going to be conflict. If you do the 2020 standard, it's not going to mean that you didn't do the 2015. Because it's probably just additional rules or
yes, yeah. And a lot of the changes, I'm not going to say most, and I guess don't quote me because I'm just under this impression. A lot of the amendments in the 2015 have just been adopted in the 2020, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's just a little refresh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is new things, and I'm waiting to get it.
Okay, nice, cool. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Like from my perspective, not necessarily even, kind of being in the industry as a realtor, but as an islander, given that there's kind of a shortage, there's a major shortage of housing. I remember when they were first talking about introducing the building codes, and I'm like, it seems like a good idea, but I'm also like, do we want barriers for people to go out and the people that are kind of scrappy out there building their thing out, their own home out in the countryside or whatever. There's something in me that says that should be allowed, right? I guess, what's your take?
So my take on that is it's hard. You're right. So that thought process of if someone wants to do what they want to do.
You're putting barriers to construction at a time when we need so much of it. That was kind of, because obviously, when you're like, so older houses on PEI, it's like, yeah, I mean, I always suggest my clients get an inspection if it's a brand new house, but older houses, it's like, come on, please get an inspection, right?
Yeah,
because
for sure.
there's a lot of variety. And I mean, there's some stuff that just doesn't meet that old code that is totally fine too. Like, sometimes it's like the way that, arguably, right? So like maybe there's a spot where someone could maybe fall off the stairs or something, you know what I mean? Whereas like you can take a sort of an educated risk, if you will. So like say, a hand railing's not in the right place, but it kind of, the hand railing there would block the view of the staircase going down, or, there's some things where some older houses, it's like some of the ways that they broke the rules are functional. So the inspector would say like, oh, this isn't a code, by the way, just so you know. And why? Well, you could fall off this or whatever.
For sure.
And then the buyer going in educated about it, knowledgeable about it, then they can make their decision. Oh, is this a deal breaker for us, or do we want to hire someone to do this? Would we even bother hiring someone to do this?
So the problem with that, so hands down, there has to be kind of a step-by-step systematic approach to permitting and building new, because safety concerns, paramount,
big time.
Longevity of the building, right? So if you have someone who's not knowledgeable in all the aspects of building and all the aspects of making sure that that outside envelope won't let weather in, won't let Mother Nature in. And for a long time, like you're trying to do as long as possible, right? Eventually it loses, like building materials all degrade for the most part, or fall apart, or, you know what I mean? And need refurbishing or fixing. But would you be happy to buy a home that was built not permitted?
Yeah.
So here's your dilemma. Do you buy a home that was built not permitted? So you don't know if it was followed, if the steps were followed, if it had its 3 major inspections: your foundation inspection, your framing inspection, and then your total completion inspection. Or would you want to buy a home that definitely had that?
Oh yeah.
So
it's pretty obvious which one you'd rather buy.
Yeah. So
and I'm glad. I mean, I'm from currently as a realtor perspective, it is really nice to know that those inspections happen. And I still get, and you know what, when often when building a new place, there's still, when someone is buying a new place, there's still sometimes some issues. They tend to be smaller, little things. And usually it's not a major thing to deal with, but it is nice to know that building code is there for sure.
And you would see a lot of that yourself. Like I'm assuming you get to sit down with the building inspectors after they've gone through and hear a lot of the major issues. Usually
what I do is I go, the building inspector goes in, they go in and go through the whole thing, and then I join them with the client at the end. And then they go through and kind of give a high level view and point out in person anything that is of really material. And then we kind of go through that with the client and in person. And that way it's nice to do that, because then the buyer can actually like look at the thing and talk with them about like, well, how hard would this be to fix or whatever. And then they get the full report. So the report usually comes the next morning,
right?
Or overnight, and then they can kind of go through the whole report. But the report can sometimes be a little overwhelming, or it can feel like disconnected from the real thing. So I find that actually being present for the inspection is really extremely useful,
because they'd probably tell you the main things that are like of the utmost importance that need to be fixed.
Yeah, they'll kind of go through all the main deficiencies, but then you can actually talk about it with them a little bit and understand.
Get some detail.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just written down.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, honestly speaking, with inspectors, usually they can always find something,
Yeah.
and so is that thing material? Do you care? The main thing from my perspective, working with clients, is that they're just fully informed. And then if there is something, and then if there's some aspect of it that they don't fully get, it's like, okay, how do we clear up that understanding before making any decisions? So say if there's something that needs to be dealt with, and it actually needs to be dealt with, and say, well, we could say, put in the agreement, okay, the vendor needs to deal with this, or the buyer might say, okay, we could just deal with that. And then it's like, okay, would you do this? Do you need any help with that? Like, sometimes I'll even put them in touch with different contractors or different people who may be able to help them with the work. And then that way they can maybe even get a phone call about that. And so they have an idea of what they'd actually be getting into, ideally before they make the final decision to pull the chute.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you typically have that period where, it's under contract and condition of inspection.
Good to actually know that.
And financing before it's firm.
Cool.
Yeah, and they not everybody does it for new places because they are up to code. I always suggest they do. Yeah.
Sure.
And sometimes people don't want to, and ultimately that's their decision. But yeah. And then it's also kind of like strategically, sometimes it's a matter of the situation that you're in. Like if you're in a situation where there's multiple offers, I do understand why sometimes buyers do want to remove that condition. It happens less now than it used to happen in the market, just because interest rates being higher. Most offers currently are doing inspection, insurance, and financing conditions. And then if it's in the country, you got your septic and your.
So that leads me to a thought. For example, so that point of making sure you inspect newer homes.
Yeah.
Surprising what stuff can be hidden, even in new homes, especially like spec homes, builders building to sell. They're in it for profit only, right? Like not necessarily, but builders building to sell are building to sell and make money. Yeah. So they're going to try and...
Well, anybody running a business, they want to turn a profit.
So, for example, we went into an attic that relatively new home, and insulation around the hatch was 16 inches, which is, our 55 or 60-ish in the attic. But then it was out on a gable garage where the hatch is. Okay. And then we walked down and then down to the other end of the house, and about halfway down to the other end, the insulation is very little.
Oh, so they had it
just where it's visible. So if the inspector a little bit popped their head up,
would be like, "Oh, I see it. Yeah, I see it over there."
Could have been,
and often it could be an inexperienced person
exactly
doing it as well. You see that sometimes,
exactly. Yeah. Or you have, this builder has 8 houses they're building in this one spot, and they had all the insulation delivered to do it all for this one day, and then that house was the last one on the leg, and they ran out, and they're like, all right, we'll get to it tomorrow, but communication is key and can get lost in translation, and then the builder thought that it was all put in, but they didn't have enough to finish that last house, and that just got lost. Right. So things like that happen too.
Yeah, I guess that could happen. I mean, I find most of the times dealing with new construction, it is like, for one, at least what I've seen for the most part, is most of the issues are minor. And for two, when brought up, it being new, they will pretty much deal with it. So like, and sometimes it's like, it can be a situation like there was one where there was just an inexperienced electrician. It was so like they had a good, solid electrician company doing it, but one of the more junior people who had just started did some of the rooms, and in those rooms the polarity was reversed on some of the outlets, and it was just like a little thing that the inspector puts in, and it's kind of easy to find, but like in that case it's like that really shouldn't happen, and the electrician was surprised but also kind of embarrassed, and immediately was like, oh no. And the builder who had subcontracted the electrician talked to the electrician. The electrician was there immediately and dealt with it, and was kind of embarrassed, but also it was very obvious that it was sort of like a junior person just didn't know yet how to do it. And again, it's just like, it's good that we had the
mistakes are going to happen.
Inspection. Yeah.
mistakes are going to happen.
Mhm.
It's inevitable. Everybody's human. New people, the only way to train new people is to get them to do it. And the sheer amount that the construction industry has had to do, especially on PEI, with what's our vacancy rate? 1%?
Yeah, right.
Under.
Yeah.
So just the sheer amount that people are doing, things are going to get missed more and more.
Yeah.
So inspections are super important.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say too. I mean, I always suggest it. It's like, sometimes I almost feel bad asking for it in a new build just because I know how hard people work on it. And I don't actually feel bad, but it's like, I don't know how to put it, but it's like, like someone, they took,
it's like usually
the builder took great pride in their work and know that the place is really good. Mm-hmm. And then it's like whenever the person goes in and it can feel kind of nitpicky, put it that way, because with a new house, you're holding it to a very high standard. It's new. And so, but it should be, right? Mm-hmm. And so the buyers expect that. And the builders, sometimes I think it's slightly frustrating because it can be just like, honestly, I would say one thing for builders that can be must be so frustrating is little dents in doors. And so it's like there is like, sometimes you get a situation where there's like an almost indiscernible dent in a door, but it's a brand new house, right?
Yeah.
And it's a tricky moment. You see that dent and you're just like, there's a dent here.
It's a new door. So
yeah, it's a new door.
And it happens. So do you know what we do? We
dummy doors?
We just tell them.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Just be honest about it. Most of the time people don't care about small things like that.
Yes.
Or you're right. Put in the doors at
the
the
big,
very
like
end.
the super big firms, like I had these clients who had built a bunch of places, not a bunch, like a few places in the Halifax area, and they had dealt with these. The construction companies were just massive, putting in like, I don't know. They said, I think they might have even said that these companies do like hundreds of homes, and they use dummy doors,
of course. So they've developed,
but they've got a
huge
system. Yeah, systems. Exactly. Yeah.
So that they've obviously, if they're building that much,
they've probably experienced that moment so many times. And different people are going to have different perspectives on it, right? But that is the awkward moment. That's what I'm talking about, where it's like you almost feel bad when the inspector comes in. There's the photo of the dent in it, and then because the inspector said, and it's in the report, it's like the person almost feels like they have license and to be like, oh, I want a new door, and then you do look at it, and you're like, that is not going to affect your life, but if that's what you want to request and that's what your stipulation is, then that's your prerogative, right? What advice would you offer someone hiring a contractor?
Oh, there's so much to get into. First bit of advice, make sure that they aren't a fly-by-night contractor.
Okay.
Now, handymen for small jobs, like people that are just out on their own, that do specific things or get subbed by other companies, great. They're good at what they do. Like I said, the problem with the island, without the general contractor licensing requirement, is you can get anyone that can come do smaller projects, especially ones that don't really need permits, or because the clients don't want to pay for permits, or they're doing something that might be just a little bit against it, they hire the cheaper contractors. Now, this has created lots of issues. There's too many to count that I've heard of lately, but just jobs that weren't done properly and contractors got in over their head and then bailed, right? And then just didn't go back, and the client's left in the lurch, and now they've just paid to have a half-finished job.
Yeah, which would be cheaper to not have even started.
Yeah,
in some cases,
exactly.
If they have to rip out the work,
or they should have just went with someone who's insured, so at least that has some form of regulation body that they're being followed by. So on the island, like I said, there's no general contracting license, but there's the Construction Association, there's the Canadian Home Builders Association, there's the Better Business Bureau. So there's 3 entities. There's the Network of Excellence now that has vetted contractors.
Right.
So just make sure that they have some form of regulation or authority that can come down on them. You know what I mean? If they're not keeping their integrity levels high. And like I had mentioned, like smaller things, handyman, that's their company, that's their job. It's just them. They don't have any staff. Ratings and word of mouth go a long way on PEI.
For sure. Yeah.
So you're going to know which ones that are good.
Yeah.
Anyway, but when you're getting into projects that are multi-layered, or require permits, require structural changes, require multiple moving parts, having people that are experienced in it, and then past that, like I said, insured, regulated, understand the risks. So if anything does go wrong, the client is going to be safe in that avenue, because things still go wrong, even in some of the most well-planned projects and builds. And do your due diligence. Don't just hire the cheapest first option that comes knocking at your door.
It is nice for me kind of seeing different people kind of go through the process of buying things like this, and then hearing reports back about what the process was like moving forward. Sometimes there's times where I'm nervous, like say there's something going on, the builder's not getting back to them, and then I'm like calling the builder and they're like, oh no, he was just away on vacation, and and that, because that stuff does come back, right? I think that's also kind of probably a message to people out there who want to build really good businesses, building homes and that kind of thing. I think there really is like tremendous opportunity because there's such a demand. But then also it's like you can also benefit from those things where you're helping that person and it's like some annoying thing that you're helping them with. Word will get back. People will hear about those sorts of things, right? So it's just your reputation. It matters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This is a good thing, right? Because this offers a layer of protection for people. And it also means that sometimes like it's easy to get lazy or to not try hard at something you're doing, but it's like, no, this is proof that it's worth it. It is so worth trying harder, like upping that level of integrity, upping that trust thing, because that's going to make your life so much better over time, because people are going to trust you. They're going to want to work with you because you're the person that was there and didn't ghost them when things were going wrong, right?
Exactly.
And so it really is hugely beneficial to take care of these little things and to make people happy. It really is like so worth it. And I think the vast majority of people know that. And I think that it is, generally speaking, the environment is pretty good for that. And I think people on PEI are aware that the reputation matters, and the people who've been at it for a long time, often it's like, that's their bread and butter.
Yes, exactly. And that's key. The people that are here to stick around and are sticking around and want to grow, because not as many people are getting into the building industry nowadays. Like, it's hard work.
Yeah.
So less and less people are getting in, and more people are going to start retiring. Yeah. And it is a lot of work. I listened to a couple of your podcasts that you already did, and specifically the one Tim Banks, how he essentially has the monopoly on all large industrial and like very large projects on the island. He's got no real competition, and that's because it's not easy to get into construction, and it's especially at a high multi-layered, multi-tiered level. So that's why we have to find a way to grow interest, grow integrity, grow communication, just start that conversation and get people more open to talking about it, sharing information rather than keeping everything close. Especially as more and more people retire and leave and take all that knowledge base and those secrets with them. We need to make it easier and better, because I can tell you from firsthand experience, it's not easy. A lot of really late nights, a lot of really early mornings. And then to go from small scale to try to start scaling bigger, we need systems. But how do we develop systems if, like me, for example, I need to be on the ground still 3, 4, 5 days a week just to make sure we're keeping on track with the jobs that we have.
Okay, so things are going well. You get a few years from now past, your systems are growing even more. You know, you're honing in on aspects of the business that you enjoy and are most fruitful for you. 10 years from now, where would you like to Maple Arc to be?
Well, that's a pretty loaded question because, again, you were right. The sky's the limit in the construction industry. There's so much need, and there's going to be even more need with the vacancy, the people retiring, the businesses leaving. So don't really know. Many different avenues we're thinking about. Custom homes, getting into, because we encompass so much and we are teaching our core group so much, creating like businesses within our business, like Maple Arc Tiling, for example, or Maple Arc Foundations, like just branching out into different aspects. That's an option. Oh, sorry. Building science. You know, getting that out there and more of a common term and more understanding around that. You know, working with the government to get contractor licensing requirements. There's a never-ending thought into what we can continue to do.
And it seems to me that you know, the combination, if you can maintain a combination of, you know, consistent quality, of integrity and trustworthiness, and then just combine that with hard work, consistently, discipline. I mean, I feel like there's kind of there's no sort of upper boundary on where a construction company on PEI can go, because there's just such incredible demand and so much need, that you know, I really hope conversations like this encourage you to, you know, to want to grow and to do more, and I hope other people listening see the call in a way for that as well. So anything else you want to talk about before we go?
Nothing specific.
Awesome. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Through Facebook. Our website. Reach out to my phone number. It's on there.
I'll put a link to the website in the video description.
Wonderful.
And while people are there, if you can click subscribe, and also you can follow you. I'll put links to that and your social media as well in there.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, David.